This is Times Radio.
Well, Public Health England are being accused of unlawfully withholding data on the variant first discovered in India, now known as the Delta variant, spread in schools. Advocacy group The Citizens and data rights group AWO sent a letter warning the government agency must release the report or face legal consequences. Clara Maguire, Executive Director of The Citizens, said there's an immediate risk to life if the data's not released. Well, let's find out more about this story with growing pressure, not only from both The Citizens and the data rights group AWO, but also from various scientists as well, who are all asking why we've not had this data on COVID transmission in schools. Let's bring on to the show Cassie Roddy. She's a solicitor at AWO. That's the data rights firm that have helped to bring the case forward. Good evening to you, Cassie.
Hello. Good evening to you.
Hello, Cassie. And we'll also link in as well Ed Finch, who's principal of Chagford Primary School in Devon. Good evening to you, Ed. Good evening to you, Ed.
Good evening, Kate. Can you hear me?
Yes, I certainly can.
Oh, thank heavens.
Ed, we'll connect with you again in just a few moments' time to get the position from a school's point of view. But Cassie, let's just get some background from you first of all. So tell us how AWO got involved with this case and why it's so important that we get this data.
Of course. Thanks very much, Kate, for having me on. So my name is Cassie Roddy and I'm a solicitor with AWO. As you said, we're a new data rights agency and we're acting for the citizens in this matter, who are an advocacy group whose objectives include increasing government transparency, including around the government's handling of the COVID-19 response. And together with my colleague Ravi Nayak of AWO and with the help of Aidan Wills, who is a barrister with Matrix Chambers, we have sent a pre-action letter on behalf of our client, the Citizens, to Public Health England, asking Public Health England to explain why it decided not to publish data on the spread of COVID-19 variants in schools and colleges, including the Indian variant that we know is spreading so rapidly, despite Public Health England having given an express representation to stakeholders on the 12th of May 2021 that it would be publishing that data in its reports going forward. And also despite Public Health England having originally decided to publish this data. And Public Health England's original intention that the data should be published is actually clear from a preprint of its report of May the 13th, which included the relevant data on COVID variants in schools, which was reviewed.
So just to be clear, when did Public Health England say that they were going to publish this data, Cassie?
So we understand that a representation was given to stakeholders on or around the 12th of May, in which Public Health England, I'm sorry, I should mention that that representation came via the Department for Education, and in that Public Health England committed to publishing the data on COVID variants of concern in educational settings in its reports and technical briefings going forward. And we understand, so the following day, May the 13th, a preprint has been seen of the report from Public Health England. And it's clear that the original intention is that the data would be published because there was the table of data, including the relevant data on COVID variants in schools, but that was actually removed from the final published report that went out on the 13th of May.
Right, so we were supposed to get it on the 13th of May and it was removed from the report. Who was it removed by, do you think?
The understanding is it was removed by Public Health England at the direction of the Prime Minister. Our understanding is that the preprint of the report contained the data and that data was removed from the final published report following a direction from the Prime Minister's office, 10 Downing Street, that Public Health England should not publish the data.
Is there any response from Number 10, from Downing Street, as to why this data has been withheld, why it was removed from this report by Public Health England?
No, our client has not received any response to date, but in the pre-action letter that we sent on our client's behalf, we have asked for a full explanation from Public Health England of his decision-making around this. Our client is also requesting that the data be made available immediately, in line with Public Health England's previous representation that the data would be made available, and also in line with its original decision to publish the data, as is clear from the print of the report.
OK, now there's no suggestion that the data's bad. We can't make that suggestion. People might make that assumption, but the fact that it's been removed obviously leads people to ask questions, and many scientists are asking for this. Deepti Gudasani, the epidemiologist from Queen Mary's University, she's asking where the data is. UCL's Professor Christina Pagels, she's asking where the data is as well. A representative for Unison has said the organisation is in favour of the legal action which is being brought forward now, or preempted, or sent in a preemptive letter to government. They support the data being released. Do we have any information at all about whether the government has anything to hide? Is there anything historically that perhaps the letter has pointed out in terms of areas of concern?
No, but the letter has really reiterated what you just said there, Kate, which is that educational unions and scientists have been calling for this data to be released. And I suppose our client's position is that this is unlawful because Public Health England appears to have surrendered its discretion to publish data on public health matters to the Prime Minister, which it's not entitled to do as a matter of public law. Essentially, Public Health England had originally made a decision based on its own independent judgment of this situation, of the importance of the data, and of course, bearing in mind the representation it had given that the data would be published. And the only reason for its changing its mind on publishing this data appears to have been the direction from the Prime Minister. And of course, our client has concerns given the ongoing updates that are being made by the UK government to the COVID-19 restrictions, following the failure to publish the data in the May the 13th report. Of course, we had the lifting of restrictions around wearing of masks in schools, and the data has not been published since.
Yeah, so in a statement to The Independent, who's also been following this story, a Public Health England spokesperson noted that a breakdown of the number of cases of each variant is published weekly. We're looking to extend this data to include information on clusters and outbreaks of variants by setting. So they're sort of denying ever having said that they'd published it. Once we're happy with the collection process and that the data's robust and quality assured, it'll be presented in a clear format. So in their defence, they are saying once the data is robust enough and quality assured, then we will publish it. It hasn't stopped, of course, the clamour for its release. Thank you, Cassie Roddy. Go on.
Very quickly, Kate, what I would just say in response to that is Public Health England had decided to publish that data in its report of the 13th of May. So I suppose the excuses that are being given about the robustness of the data does not appear to have deterred it in its original decision, which ostensibly was based on its taking all of the important public health considerations into account. And based on those considerations, it had decided to include the data in the report. It was only following the direction from number 10 that the data was removed.
So they are rowing back on that somewhat. Cassie Roddy, thanks for painting the picture on that. Solicitor at AWO. It's a data rights firm that have brought the case forward for advocacy group The Citizens. And this is the fact that Public Health England are being accused of unlawfully withholding data on the Delta variant spread in schools. Let's speak to Ed Finch now, principal of Chagford Primary School in Devon. Thanks for hanging on for us, Ed.
No problem.
Your reaction to some of what you've heard, there appears to be a bit of a battle here to understand why Public Health England promised a specific set of data on transmission of COVID-19, particularly this variant that originated in India in schools, why they promised it and why it hasn't been delivered. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, so as a head teacher, I'm trying to manage the anxieties and the worries and the concerns of this really complex community. There's the learners in the school, and there's their parents, and there's my staff who have to work in there. There's lots of people who are really worried. And my job is to stand in the middle and try and use all the information that I can get hold of to do this safely. So I'm constantly reviewing my risk assessment to make sure that we're doing this the very best that we can. So here's some information which looks like it might be really useful to me, actually. Can I collapse my bubbles now? Can I let the children have playtime together? Is it going to be safe to have assembly in the hall again? Are we going to have like a Leavers show for the year sixes? Like, they're practical questions that shape the coming weeks for my children and the experience they're going to have. here's some useful information. Apparently, I'm not allowed to have it. I don't know. Maybe I'm not a grown-up enough or something.
Well, apparently none of us are allowed to see it. So
exactly, yeah.
whether we're child or adult, it doesn't make any difference in this situation. Ed, do you or any of your principal, head teacher colleagues, have you had any or witnessed any increase in cases because of the Delta variant, the variant that originated in India? Have you seen any impact on it?
No, I'm right down in the southwest. My school, Chagford, is actually in the middle of the Dartmoor National Park. We haven't seen a live case down here for some time.
You're like a socially distant school, aren't you then?
Yeah, we really are. But so there's this element in the community of people wanting to believe it's all over, and you see that right across the country now, don't you? In the way that London's getting crowded again, and the beaches are. We need the information to make sure we're making the right decisions. There has to be a really good reason why we're not getting it. Otherwise, I think it's just another nail in the coffin of public confidence in how this is being handled.
Ed Finch, thanks so much for joining us, Principal of Chagford Primary School in Devon. Appreciate your point of view on that. Thank you very much. Well, listening in was Professor Lawrence Young. He's a virologist and Professor of Molecular Oncology at the University of Warwick. Good evening to you, Professor Young.
Good evening.
Hello. Your response, please. I'm not sure if you've been following this as well, but it appears there is data available on COVID transmission, particularly the Delta variant in schools. It was promised by Public Health England. It was meant to be in a report of theirs published on the 13th of May. The data was there, but according to this preemptive legal letter that's been released and made public, the government via Number 10 decided to take the data out. What's your reaction?
Well, it's unfathomable, isn't it, as to what's going on here. We've heard this afternoon, actually, that not too far from where I live in Staffordshire, in a small town, Leek, that 1,000 pupils have gone into self-isolation because 28 cases of the Delta variant infecting those school children has been discovered there. So you start to wonder then, and you can't help but start to get concerned that this might be the tip of an iceberg situation, and why on earth we're not seeing the data. It is, as I said earlier, it's just unfathomable as to what's going on. And it's bound to lead to all sorts of concerns and conspiracies, isn't it, really?
It must be really frustrating from a science point of view as well. We've got some of your, very esteemed colleagues across various, universities, whether they're virologists or epidemiologists, calling for this data and saying, how on earth are we meant to get a balanced view? How on earth are our modellers meant to get a balanced view on what happens leading up to June the 21st? If we can't see the data?
Absolutely. There's never been a more crucial time to see what's going on in the real world with infection rates as we head towards the 21st of June. It's a crucial period. And as my colleagues and I've been saying over the last few days, we are on a bit of a knife edge here. And we really do need to see all the data that's available. We need to keep pushing ahead, obviously, with surge testing where it's required and surge vaccination. But we do need the data. This is all about data, not dates. We're not seeing the data.
Yeah, it seems that data, according to this action anyway, has been suppressed from us. Just tell us where you're at, Professor Young. We know that the University of Warwick gets involved in SPI-M. It has a very strong history and a very, very strong positioning in terms of advising government or, feeding in data to the government. It has a great regard for the university in that term. What's your feeling on this so-called Freedom Day of the 21st of June? No COVID deaths recorded for the first time since summer last year today, and this is perhaps causing some people to feel a little better about that Freedom Day.
Yes, well, on the whole, things have been looking much better, and obviously 0 deaths today is very, very encouraging. But we have to remember that there's at least a month lag between the date, between somebody getting sick and sadly very poorly and dying, and so that data lags by a month or so. The big issue now is with the cases that we're seeing day by day, over 3,000 cases a day. Are we going to start to see increased hospitalizations? Everything's looking good. But I think one of the big problems here is that we've been too much focusing on the 21st as a date when data is so important. And a key element of that data has to be the proportion of the adult population that's fully vaccinated. And looking at that data, I think, is really important. So keeping and pushing ahead with vaccination, particularly second doses, is a really important approach, and it's an approach that other countries like Israel have taken as they've been easing from lockdown. What proportion of your adult population are fully vaccinated? Ideally, you want that to be more than 70%. We're currently at 47%. So there's a bit of a way to go.
Yeah, and there's the point too that it takes 3 weeks for you to build up any sort of immunity after a vaccine. So, we are, 3 weeks away from June the 21st now. We'd have to have 70% of the population vaccinated by today, really, wouldn't we, in order for that to have the full effect by the 21st?
Yeah, well, exactly. And remember that as far as this Delta variant is concerned, the data suggests that only 33% of individuals are protected 3 weeks after their first vaccination.
Yeah.
So this is why I think we're all a bit concerned. This is why we're all a bit concerned that we're on a. So we keep talking about this knife edge, and it really is a knife edge. But we can't make a judgment until we see all the data.
So you wouldn't put your neck out and say we should put a stop on the 21st of June. Now you would like to wait, but then is waiting for just a week before the 21st of June, the 14th of June. Is that too late? It doesn't feel incredibly fair to me on many businesses to only have a week's notice.
No, I know that is a real issue. It's always been an issue about how long, how far in advance businesses and the economy needs to understand restrictions. My view is the way things are looking at the moment, it is touch and go, actually, and that what we need to think about is just a small extension, perhaps, of the current restrictions. There are certain things, in our benefit. We know that vaccination does break the link between infections and disease, and we also, thank goodness now, have great weather. And weather will make a big difference to the way this virus transmits. We know being outside is important at preventing transmission, and being outside more in the sun. The virus doesn't like the sun very much. All these things are really good factors that hopefully will mitigate against the rising number of cases. But again, as I keep saying, we need to be judged on what's going on with data, not dates.
There needs to be transparent data on this. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Professor Lawrence Young, virologist and Professor of Molecular Oncology at the University of Warwick. Appreciate your view on that. Thank you. Coming up, an extended school day. Is it a goer or not?